Ah, the racing genre. Not the newer ones, though. Those don't count. Need for Speed, Forza, Midnight Club, none of those. I'm talking about the classic ones. Classic ones on either the Nintendo Entertainment System, the Super Nintendo Entertainment System, and the N64. Those racing games were the absolute jewel of the era, specifically Top Gear, Super Mario Kart, and this game. This Mode 7 gem, then it is none other, F-Zero, released in 1991 for North America, and to be played on the best console ever made, the Super Nintendo Entertainment System. We at Digiware Software first picked up this game at our local video game store, which has since closed down. I say that with a tear in my eye, but with a Super Nintendo controller in my hands as to remember the greatness that was our local video game store. Nonetheless, this is F-Zero, and this is single-handedly the best racing game on the Super Nintendo. Super Mario Kart comes close, but F-Zero was a launch title for God's sake. Much like Super Mario World and Pilot Wings, F-Zero presented to the world what the SNES could truly handle. Imagine if Final Fantasy VI was a launch title, or even Chrono Trigger. That is a world I would one day want to live in. However, we must be content with having remembered Super Mario World, Pilot Wings, and F-Zero as launch titles. As it were, I'm perfectly content in this world then. F-Zero is a futuristic racing game developed by Nintendo, and was the first in the subsequent F-Zero series. Being a racing game set in the future, it takes place in 2560 as high-speed, plasma-powered, competitive racing is back in style again, much like Formula One racing championships of today. That's really all the story you need. When we first played this game, the story didn't matter to us at all. The first thing that came to our minds were the graphics, the sound, and the fact that we actually owned a freaking Super Nintendo. F-Zero blew our minds, and still does today. But before F-Zero, we had no idea what Mode 7 graphics actually looked like in motion. We had read in Nintendo Power about this new 3D depth feeling you'd get when you played this game. Never before had we played a unique 3D game. I mean, a few years later, the Virtual Boy came out, and we all knew how that went over. Everyone in America that ever owned a Virtual Boy loved playing 3D games with a stand and a large console that only showed the games in red and black, because we still, to this day, talk about how much we adored this new console. No, we really hate the Virtual Boy. A standard race in F-Zero consists of 5 laps. F-Zero, although being presented as very futuristic, doesn't stray far from racing championships of today. There's the pit, where you drive through at lightning speed and refuel, there's standard competitors, and there's a ranking system, as well as stats for each hover vehicle and player. Although F-Zero is over 20 years old now, it still feels very new to us at Digiware Software. Just the feel of the control over the hovercraft, it feels very fluent and responsive. Much like any other Super Nintendo game, there has to be some degree of difficulty. As you progress through the game into different sets of classes like Knight, Queen, and King, as well as Beginner, Standard, and Expert, we still don't have the balls to play Expert on the King setting. It's really difficult if you haven't played it in a while, as we quickly found that out to be very true. This was F-Zero for the Super Nintendo Entertainment System, and it's Digiware Software's favorite racing game ever made. Except Super Mario Kart on the SNES and Super Mario Kart 64. Those don't count, though. Those weren't launch titles, for God's sakes. I mean, come on, F-Zero, the standard of futuristic racing at its finest.